Peter sat in his rented cabin contemplating how to get Tom's files to the media. First, he thumbed through the phone book looking for local news stations, hoping to turn the information over to one of them. He felt foolish looking for someone to turn the files over to when he, himself, didn't know what they included. What would he tell them? Eventually, his curiosity got the best of him. He didn't know at the time, but that's when he committed the dumbest act he has ever conceived in his life. He opened the box and looked over the material. It contained research papers regarding robotics, artificial intelligence, and stem cell research. A summary document explained how they created beings from their research. Several pages contained a narrative written by a man named Dr. John Harper and dated 1996. Peter wondered how the information was relevant. It was over 20 years old. As he continued reading, he concluded that Harper, or someone, wrote the documents at a scientific level way beyond his comprehension, perhaps beyond any modern-day scientific advancements. Most of it was difficult to understand, although he was smart enough to get a general idea of what was reported in the narrative. He read as much as his brain could handle, as most of it was technical hypothesis. It left him wondering why they included stem cell research with the other two fields of scientific study. He grabbed the thumb drives. Each one was in a single small baggie and attached to a single 8.5 by 14 sheet of heavy paper and was titled Angel Project 1987. Each thumb drive contained a label, with a date written above them. The first label read, Dana Interview, 1998, the second Dr. Stone, Dr. Houston, 2006, the third, Abortion, 20 years, 2009, and the fourth, Death of the Scientists, 2009. It looked more like evidence than research. Below the four thumb drives was a list of other titles going back to 1987, but nothing related to those titles was included in the material Tom gave him. It appeared to Peter several important thumb drives were missing from the files, because most of the titles on the list included areas in artificial intelligence, computer science, engineering, and neurology. So, Peter pulled the first of the thumb drives from the bag and inserted it into the Blu-ray player provided by the resort. It presented Dr. Harper sitting in an office behind a desk, and a barefoot, beautiful young red-haired woman, wearing jeans and a blue hoodie. She was sitting in a chair next to him, facing him. When the camera angle changed, she moved almost mechanically. Peter thought it was odd. Harper asked her several questions. She responded with a woman's voice, although she answered his questions, childlike, and when she answered she would play with her clothes and twist her hair. Peter thought the woman herself was interesting. He assumed she was the AI referred to in the reports by how she moved and reacted to the questions. He'd seen AI robots before, talking and moving around, but she wasn't like those. She was more lifelike, like a real young woman, but different. The camera moved to her face. She had freckles that jumped around as she smiled in half smiles. Her bright blue eyes looked like real eyes and they moved like natural human eyes. He questioned himself if she was AI or not. Perhaps she only acted like a robot. About 20 minutes in, she softly asked for candy, which was too strange. Harper asked her to repeat the question. I'm okay. I can wait. Wait for what? I'm hungry. Can I have some candy? Sure, you can, as soon as we finish. Peter concluded it might have been a mental institution, and she was a patient. He continued to listen to the conversation for a time as Harper asked the young woman about her life, what she remembered about her birth, and her parents. In his mind, he thought again about the advancements they achieved, even though the material was over 20 years old, and despite those advancements, he didn't believe it was a reason to kill his friends. There must be more to it. He pulled the first thumb drive from the player and inserted the second. It included the same Dr. Harper, along with two other scientists. One was Dr. David Stone, who said he was a specialist in biology and artificial human mechanics, and the other was Dr. Samuel Houston, a specialist in pediatrics and stem cell research. Peter still thought it was a weird group of people to be working together, but he could imagine the implications. Then they explained what they were doing. Peter was beside himself as Dr. Houston explained how they were using the minds and organs of aborted fetuses, keeping them viable, and integrating, or growing them onto titanium skeletons. Then Dr. Houston explained the process. All the fetuses we use are own egg. That blood type will not be rejected by any transplanted materials or organs of another blood type, which is important to our success. He pointed out several glass containers, stationed one next to another. They looked approximately 7 feet long by 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall. Each container held a body, whether dead or alive. Peter couldn't tell. Peter thought, this is more like a sci-fi movie than reality. Dr. Houston put his hand on top of a container. They live in these coffin-size glass containers for 15 months, filled with a chemical solution like an embryonic fluid. First, we place a full-size, thin and hollow, titanium skeleton in the container. It's almost like a rigid mesh. Afterward, we lay cells from the aborted child over the skeleton and encourage the cells to grow. We grow the body by stretching the cells until they completely cover the skeleton. Fortunately, the stem cells from the embryos have a fantastic ability to grow on any material that doesn't destroy those same cells. Titanium proved to be the perfect material for our purpose. While cultivating the being, we take various parts of the fetus and use its immature cells to create multiple organs and extremities. We only need to attach like-minded or similar cells to those parts of the body. We train it to grow a hand from cells of the fetus's hand, etc. That made perfect sense to Peter. Other than using body parts from a fetus, especially in this demented age, there was no reason to think what the doctor was doing was illegal, certainly not worth murdering several people over. He poured himself a glass of water to help stay awake and sat back down to watch the rest of the video. Now, as the cells grow, they stretch the material and apply the correct cells until the creature has a complete hand, including all the vessels and tendons necessary to move like a natural hand. Dr. Houston pointed to another container about half the size of the larger one. This is where we encourage all the different cells to grow and multiply. It's phenomenal how fruitful they are, but that fertility is useful for only 15 months. We must use them during that specific time period. Otherwise, we must discard them. We've made great advances with the process, adjusting the solution until we have a 50% success rate. At first, only 1 in 5 fetuses survived the procedures. We found out each cell's DNA has built into it the components, or programming, to grow the whole extremity or body part we harvested them from. For example, if it was a hand, it will grow the fingers, the nails and all the parts nature intended to grow to become a functional hand. We can't take credit for what it does on its own. It's designed within the DNA. We can only manipulate the growth. It's astounding. We're not sure if human DNA is an element that occurs in nature or perhaps an alien force placed it here, maybe a force alien to the Earth, whether on purpose or by accident, we don't have a clue. Maybe, DNA grew in the past and has become extinct in its natural form. What we understand right now is we can only draw DNA from a living entity to create another living entity. DNA might make us question whether there's a God, but we're not trying to argue about the morality of what we're doing. Our only purpose is advancing scientific research for extending the lifespan of humanity. Again, we can grow a complete body by placing parts of the body into the solution, except for the brain and its stem. Dr. Houston pointed at a whiteboard with several diagrams on it. We develop the respiratory system, circulatory system, and the nervous system simultaneously. From there, we concentrate on the parts of the anatomy for audio and optics. It was approaching 1 a.m., and Peter was nodding out. He decided to watch the rest of the video in the morning. He did not sleep well that night, and despite his tiredness, he woke up almost every hour in a panic. He hated himself for being afraid. Thomas had become a close friend, as did Cindy. He wrestled every time he woke, trying to force himself back to sleep. I don't know how much more I can take. The cabin was equipped with coffee and a coffee maker, so when he finally woke for the day, at around 11 a.m., he made himself some coffee and sat down to watch the rest of the video. After reviewing 5 minutes of the video, Dr. Houston continued, scientists made hundreds of attempts to put parts in the right place, attempting to complete the process within the allowed time frame, creating what we would consider a normal human being. As I pointed out earlier, we're now at a 50% success rate. Next, he lifted a vial of a liquid that looked like a mix of mucus and water and presented it to the camera. This embryonic fluid that each is nesting in will supply all the subject's needs until fully developed. He moved the camera close to one container. Peter saw it contained an almost complete body of a human being. It was breathing and looking around while lying in a semi-fetal position, which gave Peter the shivers. Once the whole body is complete and the systems operating, we perform a heart, lung and kidney transplant replacing the creature's current organs. We do so because the lungs, heart, and kidneys are too young and weak to survive outside the nest. After the transplants, they can survive outside the container, but must rely on artificial equipment for at least 3 months. Our process takes 1.5 years to complete. He walked over to another whiteboard that had several posters hanging down the front. They looked like medical posters of the organs and circulatory system of the human body. Another one had all the parts of the human brain and brain stem. Parts of it were lighter than the rest, with small colored cables leading away. Peter assumed those parts were emphasized for a reason. 6 months into the process we supply the creatures with knowledge through a process of neurostimulation. Dr. Simon Arch and Dr. Henry Stickle developed the process in 1993. It allows us to upload information to the brain through an array of neural stimulators connected to 4 lobes of the cerebral cortex. Prior to Arch's and Henry's scientific advancement, the creatures emerged from the containers unable to exceed the mentality of a 2-year-old child. They needed a boost early in the process to spark their minds to receive information. We could never achieve success until Arch and Stickle's breakthrough. The coffee made Peter's stomach growl. Maybe it wasn't the coffee, but the video that upset his stomach, maybe his sadness. He turned the Blu-ray off and sat in silence for the next hour, thinking about the last couple of days. How does everything appear to be going along just fine, and then voila, everything is spinning out of control? He knew he was not going to make it to either Thomas or Cindy's funeral. He couldn't even call to find out when they were for fear of being found by St. Paul. He had to get something to eat, so he walked to the little store for a sandwich and a cup of chicken soup. It was a beautiful day on the coast. He wanted to enjoy it, but he could not snap out of it. After lunch, he turned the Blu-ray on and finished watching the rest of the videos on the thumb drives. Houston continued, we initiate the neurostimulation process by sending a small electrical charge to the temporal lobe which wakes the brain up. We continue applying charges until we get a response. If we don't get a response within 3 days, the subject isn't viable, so we discard it. If we get a response, we continue with set intervals of small electrical shocks until the hippocampus responds. Once we get the desired response from the hippocampus, we continue the charges on and off. If all goes according to the plan, when we stop, we should get an expected response where the brain was expecting the next charge. That means the brain is creating memories and is ready to operate at a higher functional level. Once the higher brain functions activate, we attach receptors to points in the occipital lobe, associated with interpreting visual stimuli, and areas within the parietal lobe that interprets sensory perception. When complete, we teach the subject through a method of sensory reception, virtual reality. The human brain is nicely pliable at that stage, and once we get past the self-awareness, infant, and toddler stages we can apply 20 years of knowledge and history in the matter of a few months, and they will accept the information as fast as we can provide it to them. We haven't figured it out yet, but for the first 5 years outside the container, the subject's language skills are equal to a young child. We don't know why they are delayed in such a way. Even though they have an IQ exceeding 200, they express it as a child. When they turn 5, a change in their mental capacity takes place within their brains. We're not sure what changes, but from that point on, they're more like a young adult. Peter spoke out loud, "This is sick." Then Houston explained the chemicals called candy, most of which Peter did not comprehend. He explained in scientific terms how it was a nutritional food supplement, with the texture of baby food to a candy bar. It's what the creatures eat until they can digest normal foods. Peter understood it was the candy Dania asked for in the first video. He guessed they must have experienced hunger. How weird. They were making half-human, half-mechanical beings, or whatever they called them, and growing them in incubators. Wow. Dr. Harper came back to talk about the being, the young woman who sat next to him. Dania was only 3 years old when he interviewed her in 1998. He explained she learned at a rate several hundred times faster than the average human being. When she reached 5 years old, she had an IQ of over 200. Beyond that, there were no tests available to measure it. Dania was now 23 years old. Peter wondered what she was like now. When the second video finished, Peter put in the third one. It was a Dr. Stone explaining the sickening business of purchasing the bodies of aborted babies while they were still viable. He explained how they purchased fetus parts back in 1988, particularly their brains, and subjected them to a solution that would keep them viable, until they could implant them into the titanium skeletons, and how it took over 600 attempts before the first implant succeeded. Then he spoke about the disposal of the bodies, by sedation and cremation, at 2 years old, because of their inability to grow intellectually beyond a 2-year-old, confirming what Dr. Houston said earlier. When Peter considered the actual number of lives taken by St. Paul, he became angry, and had to back off from watching any longer. He spent the next 20 minutes looking at the other paperwork. He found most of it just as disturbing, so he turned the video back on. Stone explained how they learned to remove the brain and part of the stem to satisfy the new neurostimulation process. Then, he repeated several of the same methods Houston already revealed, but added more detail regarding the changes from the initial processes. It was startling how Stone didn't have a problem with buying viable children from the abortion mills. He mentioned the kickbacks St. Paul paid to make these fetuses available. Peter found all this disturbing and unbelievable, but the doctors explained the deplorable act in such a natural way it made sense. At one point, Dr. Stone suggested clinics paid women to get pregnant and abort their babies for this research. It seemed to Peter what Dr. Stone revealed was damning enough to offer the media the story. Near the end of the video, Dr. Harper came back on to explain the progress of the being he named Dania. She was now 11 years old and exceeded expectations. He stated her intelligence was immeasurable, yet she displayed many childlike desires and tantrums. He expressed concern because the mechanics she possessed gave her above normal strength. She was continually bruising herself during fits of anger. He almost appeared afraid and mentioned she and the rest of the first gens continued to exhibit periods of paranoia, although slight it was a concern and they were monitoring it. He said it was only a problem for the first-generation beings. It was not a problem for the second-generation beings, and he said Dr. Houston was working on treatments to control the problem for the first gens. Then, he talked about another 260 other beings in assorted stages of development. No sooner did he finish talking about the other beings when a figure from behind took his head right off at the shoulders. Blood splattered everywhere, and it blacked out the camera. This can't be real, and must be part of a horror movie, he thought as he got up and began walking in circles, quickly running his hands through his hair. The living room rearranged itself after he saw that. The room was lit, but dark and shadow-like at the same time. Perhaps he was hallucinating. He thought he might have a heart attack, but it seemed more spiritual. It was pure evil. He stopped watching the video and retrieved another glass of water. Once he calmed down, he pulled a third drive out of the player and put in the fourth one. The fourth video showed the lab where the 3 doctors were lying on the floor in a bloody mess. He heard a man say the woman Dania killed all 3. A nervous man, who identified himself as a St. Paul security officer, came on and explained what happened. He mentioned Dania was responsible, but she and another 152 beings were captured and detained. Peter turned the player off again and thought, I can't take this. He wrestled with those thoughts for another half an hour before he watched the rest of the video. There was no turning back. He needed to know everything before he turned it over to anyone. After the video finished, he reached into the box and pulled out a cell phone. He knew it contained the most recent information regarding the files. Thomas' cell phone showed Jill opening the door to the lab and then recorded her walking down an aisle passing two of the same containers displayed in the earlier videos. She called them incubators. She pointed at them. These are new in this building. They brought these in 2 days ago. I figured they forgot to put the proper restriction signs in place. I'm certain they don't want us in here, but this is too disturbing to ignore. Peter knew the video came from Tom's cell, as he turned the cell to one incubator. The machine contained part of a young child. He directed his camera at the face of a beautiful young baby girl. They were keeping her alive, even though it was only the top half of her little body. The child opened her eyes, which caused Tom to jump back momentarily. Peter could tell by the way the camera moved. Tom explained she was a late-term aborted child. He said they read in the files how St. Paul kept them alive until they could remove all the necessary parts to implant into a skeleton, and then he explained how it was not right and how they planned to take all the files related to the experiment. Peter became sick to his stomach again and bent over to throw up in the wastebasket. It was one thing seeing it in the videos, but when Tom, his friend, presented it, he had to throw up. At the base of her container, there were several organs they removed from her aborted body and were saving for cell harvest. He knew Tom didn't conduct stem cell research, but he was competent enough to explain what was happening in those machines. Peter asked himself, what has happened to mankind? How can anyone practice such evil? For a moment he considered it was justice, and the doctors deserved punishment for what they were doing. He became frustrated. This is what Jill and her family, Thomas and Cindy, died for. Peter needed something other than water, so he wandered back over to the little store for a soda. He was in a daze all the way there. On his way back, he came across a young woman sitting in the sand. She was very pretty and the light from the setting sun lit up her beautiful young face, although she appeared to be alone and out of place. He asked her if she needed help. No, thank you. Then, she pulled a small handgun from her pocket and pointed it at him. Where are the research papers? That shocked Peter, but he maintained his composure. He thought for sure he was going to die. She stood up, looking at him. I want those research papers, now. Afraid, Peter told her they were in his cabin. Good. Which is your residence? He pointed to the cabin where he was staying. Once he pointed out his cabin, she reached around and pinched the back of his neck and broke it. He fell dead into the sand. She retrieved the paperwork, the drives, and disappeared down the beach.